Sanbona, before we start, I'd like to mention that I invited the CEO of Standard Bank, Mr. Sim Shabalala, to be part of the public conversation. In turn, he unleashed the director of the biggest law firm in Africa to threaten me. So I know that they're listening and they're part of the conversation. They're welcome to step in whenever suitable. The fraud. I went to a dealership, I chose a car, they gave me the price, I paid cash for the car. They told me to come 2 days later as they needed to service, register, all of that. And when I went to collect the car, I was sat down and I was told that they decided to send the international payment back for whatever reasons they explained. And their suggestion was that we use local banks to finance the car. But because I'm not domiciled in South Africa, I had to use my foundation as the buyer and then sign as surety. So this was okay. I did that. And a day later, I got an email that Standard Bank has approved the loan. 15th April 2015, I went to collect the car. I signed all the legal documents, the installment sale agreement, the contract, and the insurance papers. At the end of the month, when they deducted, they took double the agreed, well, nearly double the agreed installment. So I called Standard Bank and I said, there's a mistake. You have taken nearly double what we agreed upon. And they said, who are you? We don't know you. I said, oh, the car is registered in my foundation. And they said, no, this is not registered in your foundation's name, and neither is it registered in your name. We don't know you. The following month, they took nearly double the installment again. I went to Standard Bank. I spoke. I tried everything I could. They were just not listening to me. The third month, they took the double installment again. So I wrote a letter of demand. I said I demand to see the installment sale agreement that I signed because it has the correct installment in it. Secondly, I'm going to stop paying until you tell me who my car is registered to and until I see the installment sale agreement that I signed. So what I did, I went to the bank, I stopped the payment, I opened a separate escrow account, and I deposited the wrong installment that they were depositing, the double installment. I deposited that into the new account every month so that whatever they do, they cannot accuse me of not having the installment. So I made sure that every month I deposit that installment, and I just sat back. I went to Rosebank Police Station. I got them to sign the odometer of the car, give me an affidavit, and park the car. So I stopped using the car, I stopped paying, I bought a new car, and I waited for Standard Bank to come back. About 3 months later, they wrote a letter, but the letter was registered to my daughter. And in this letter, they were saying, you haven't paid your installments in 3 months. So we went to Standard Bank and we said, there's obviously a mistake. I don't know where my daughter fits in, but the car was bought by my foundation, which is the account that you were deducting from. And secondly, I signed as surety. My daughter comes from school. She's a student. She's never worked. I don't see how the bank could have financed a car worth millions to a child. That's where the fight started. Standard Bank then decided to go to court to go and fight for the return of the car. Standard Bank did not disappoint. They rushed to court to apply to repossess my car. In their particulars of claim, they had to attach the installment sale agreement that I had been begging for months. And 8-9 months after the purchase of the car, for the first time, I saw a copy of the installment sale agreement. And to my shock, it was a completely different document. This one came from a dealership I have never dealt with. The contracting party was changed. The address did not exist. The employer did not exist. The engine number was changed. The chassis number was changed. The year of manufacturing for the car was made younger by 3 years. The price was highly inflated. The signature was forged. So this was so obvious that it didn't even worry me. I just thought Standard Bank is a juristic person. I'm not going to point fingers. I'll do the responsible thing. I'll go to Standard Bank. I will show them what the problem has been all along, and then we can sort it out. When I got to Standard Bank, they looked me in the eye and they said, this document is exactly the document that we approved your installment sale agreement on. It's the correct document. There's nothing wrong with it. They refused to listen to me. So I said, okay, then we go to court. They applied for default judgment. I defended the action. We got a date, got to court. We were on the roll. We waited all day to be called. Every case was called except us. Little did we know that Standard Bank, behind my back, went to some acting judge in the chambers and got the default judgment approved behind my back. So I went home thinking my case is not called, and a few days later, I was going for a run in the morning, and when I stepped out of the yard, the street was just chock-a-block. It was these cars that pull other cars. They had 2 of them. They had police, and there were just a number of people in the street and a sheriff. So as I stepped out of the yard, they stopped me and they asked me if I live in the yard, and I said yes, and they said, oh, they're here to collect a car. And I said to them, on what basis? We went to court and there was nobody, our case was not called. And they showed me a default judgment for the day, and they showed me a writ of execution that has been approved. All of this was getting more strange. So I said to them, I'm not releasing the car. They can do whatever they want, and I went for my run. 10 kilometers later, I came back, they were waiting. I go for my run at 5 a.m., so they must have arrived there much earlier, because when I came out, they had parked outside. They were drinking coffee from their flasks. So I refused to give them the car. I had parked the car deliberately in a manner that even if I'm not there, no one can take it out. So they brought these big cars inside the yard, and they tried to break the house, and eventually 8 hours later, they got an instruction from the bank not to break the house, but to leave. So on this particular day, I actually realized that maybe I'm in more trouble than I envisaged. I realized that I'm dealing with very unscrupulous characters. I had identified the fraud in the restructured installment sale agreement. Now I had just discovered a second fraud where they went to chambers to find an acting judge to fraudulently grant a default judgment whilst I'm sitting in court. So these were 2 very serious things. And then thirdly, they go and get the writ of execution. They come to my house at 4 o'clock in the morning with a squad. There were at least 20 policemen, and everybody was on the phone taking instructions. They were intimidating me. They were playing tricks. I just remained calm. I went to the house. I made them fresh pots of coffee. I gave them fresh scones. Then I went to my study to work. In preparation for the default judgment hearing, I had unpacked the installment sale agreement, alphabet by alphabet. And I had at least 20 points that were violations. So I was very ready for that. I knew exactly what was in the installment sale agreement. But on that day, I realized I need to look at something much higher than that. So the first thing I did was to look for the best PI, private investigator, because I wanted to understand what exactly is happening. I found a gentleman called Mr. Henry Kruger, who came from the Brixton Murder and Robbery Squad. He was recommended as a very, very meticulous private investigator. Secondly, I started preparing papers. I realized that there's an active writ of execution. So I prepared urgent papers to apply for a stay of that writ. Secondly, I prepared papers to rescind the default judgment that was granted fraudulently. Thirdly, I decided to write to the banking ombudsman, and I explained this entire story, adding my notes for the fraudulent installment sale agreement. Then after all those papers were ready, I then wrote a letter to Standard Bank. I addressed the letter to the head of risk and forensics. I offered myself and my daughter to be tested against the fraudulent installment sale agreement. I copied the banking ombudsman again. I copied joint CEOs, Mr. Ben Kruger and Mr. Sim Shabalala. I copied the head of vehicle finance. I copied the head of the fraud department. I copied all of them. And I sent the letter and I said, there is a problem. And I demand that the bank looks at this problem. I said, I understand that the CEOs have a fiduciary duty towards the bank, but this, I can invoke negligence if the CEOs are going to neglect this fraud. I'd like this fraud to be looked at, and I'm submitting myself and my daughter to be tested whichever way. Within an hour of sending the letter to Standard Bank, I received 2 correspondence. One was from it was an electronic mail from a Mr. Joop Dekker, who said he's the head of risk and forensics. He copied the banking ombudsman and he said he's rejecting the offer to test my daughter and I because the bank is of the view that the installment sale agreement is authentic and valid. Secondly, there was a knock on my door and I got an urgent hand-delivered letter from a law firm, Holsteins and Associates, who said they were representing Standard Bank. And the contents of the letter was a warning or threat that I must never write to the CEOs of Standard Bank again. Anything I want to say, I must say it through the lawyers. The first confirmation for me was that as of that day, both CEOs of Standard Bank, Mr. Ben Kruger and Mr. Sim Shabalala, knew of the fraud. They were personally informed by me. Instead of attending to the fraud, they got lawyers to threaten me. Then I rushed to court to go and file the papers. I filed both applications, the one to rescind the default judgment and the urgent application for an interdict to stay the writ of execution. After that, I came back, I went to the sheriff, asked him to serve both Standard Bank and the lawyers, and then I personally walked into Standard Bank and served them the documents for both applications. Then I personally went to the attorneys and served them the papers. I told them that it's an urgent application and they have to appear in Gauteng, South Gauteng High Court the following afternoon. From there, I drove straight to Sandton Police Station and I opened a fraud case against Standard Bank with all the facts and the proof. When I got home, dead tired that evening, I had Mr. Henry Kruger, the private investigator, with two of his partners, waiting for me with reams and reams of feedback. The private investigating team brought me the worst news. First of all, they told me this is not a mistake. There's many people going through it. They've got clients who have gone through exactly the same thing. They told me this is a scam that is run by a syndicate of very, very senior people. The syndicate involves law enforcement, it involves sheriffs, auctioneers, the dealerships of exotic cars, but importantly, the heads of finance in banks. Because for these deals to be approved over and over again, it needs the head of finance to sign off. At this point, I'd like to explain how the risk process works within a bank. There's somebody who wants to buy a car, I don't know what cars cost, for 50,000 Rand. Maybe just the manager can approve that. If you're buying a Mercedes-Benz that is 800,000 Rands, it's a different quorum of the risk credit committee that approves it. But there are cars that need the full quorum of the credit committee to approve over and above the head of finance. Not only because of the cost, but because some of the cars are very dangerous. So they look at age, they look at how much do you earn, they look at do you have immovable property. You can't go and buy a car for 2, 3, 4, 5 million Rands if you don't even have a home. So they look at all of those things to see if you are stable enough to qualify for this. And there are cars that are not sold to people who are younger than a certain age. So they look at all of that scoring to qualify you. So the head of finance is very important for this level of cars because he has to put his final signature. Then they told me what has happened to my transaction exactly. This information was imperative for me to receive before going to attend agent court tomorrow. So I went to agent court. I presented everything I know. I presented how the National Credit Act has been violated. I presented the fact that I had asked for the installment sale agreement 12 times. I had all my emails and I had all the rejections. I had every piece of document. The judge was a very, very smart lady who asked me questions for 2 hours. She pierced me left, right, and center. And at the end, she said to me, I am satisfied that there's a possible alleged fraud here, and I'm going to grant the interdict to stay the writ of execution pending the rescission application to be heard. I left the court with my interdict and I came back home I wrote a very strong letter to Standard Bank. And I still copied both CEOs. I copied every head of department, finance, fraud department, risk, forensics, and I copied the attorneys. And I said, now I know what is happening, and now I insist. This is not a matter of the courts. We are wasting courts' time and we are wasting money on legal fees. I actually said to them, if this case has to go through trial, by the time the case gets to trial, we would have bought 4 of these cars. That's how much the legal costs are going to cost. Whereas we can sit around the table and reconstruct my installment sale agreement the way it was. I pay the car off and then we part in peace. They refused, but I had my interdict to stay the writ of execution. Before we start my part 6, bengicela ukuphendula some recurring questions in your comments, please. I have grouped together the recurring questions into 7 groups, and I'm going to try and answer them now. If I pelele with video 1, I'll do 2 videos answering the questions, and then we can start with part 6. Number 1, how do you buy such an expensive car and then leave the bank without a copy of the installment sale agreement? This is a valid question. First, for this transaction, I never set foot at the bank. Everything happened at the dealership. The signing of the documents on the day I took delivery of the car was at the dealership. I remember it was between 6 and 7 at night. There was load shedding. Their generator had just blown up and there was no electricity. It was dark when I went to collect my car. Then I was told about problems with printers and the electricity. But the main thing was that the bank has to first moderate the contract, co-sign, and then email it to me. So I said to them, no problem. So I'll collect the car when all of that is done. I'm not taking the car. So they panicked a bit and there were conversations up and down. Eventually, the owner of the dealership came to me and said, Prof, here's what I'm offering you. Please take the car. I'm writing you a letter on my letterhead. I will personally sign it. And I will explain that the installment sale agreement is in process. The bank has to co-sign and moderate it, and the fact that you bought the car from us, so everything is in order. And for me, that letter was sufficient. So I took the letter, and that letter went a long way to defend me in court. Second question was regarding the default and summary judgment. I think there was a confusion there. What happens is if you default at a bank, they then apply for default judgment. If you defend that default judgment, then the bank comes back and upgrades it into summary judgment. By the time you get a court date, you're going to argue summary judgment in court. My gripe was exactly that. I was sitting in court to go and argue against the summary judgment. But the bank was unethical. They went behind my back to chambers to find an acting judge to grant an order wrongfully. That is exactly my gripe. And this ended up at the Judicial Service Commission. It's a matter that we are discussing later in the process. Third, somebody asked, why was I defending myself? Why did I have to prepare the applications myself? Why didn't I hire a lawyer? This is an imperative question. I was going to address it at the end, which I will, but I will just explain this. What banks or powerful people do, but especially banks, is they brief every law firm that has muscle. They give it work. And they look at all the smaller law firms and the individual lawyers that have got muscle, that have got a brain. They brief everybody so that When you go to anybody needing a lawyer to defend you against the bank, everybody tells you, I'm sorry, it's conflict of interest. They are my client. Nobody can touch you because they're all briefed. This is deliberate, it's a strategy, but we'll discuss it in another video. And somebody wanted to know why the judge questioned me for nearly 2 hours. Like, what kind of questions are those? The exam? No. So what happens in agent court, the judge has not had the benefit of time to read the papers. So everything the judge has to know has to come from you. Mina, I am obsessed with my documents. Just so you know, I got a merit award for my law of evidence. I am obsessed with documentation. I keep everything. So everything I was saying, I was producing a paper. Everything I was saying, I was producing a paper. So it takes time for the judge to read and understand, then have more questions. So the process was slower because she didn't have the benefit of reading the papers beforehand. And somebody wanted to know about why did I say the National Credit Act was violated and they used my child as the buyer. Very simple. I told one of the CEOs, Mr. Ben Kruger, whose daughter was in the same class as my daughter at Rodin. This child had just finished school and just starting university. How could she be the buyer of a car worth millions? It just didn't make sense. But also that's in another video, the NCA entire explanation. Lastly, a lot of people want to know, with such a burden placed on people, how can a layman, somebody who gets a normal salary and who doesn't have this amount of courage and resources, how does that person survive an ordeal like this? You don't survive it. So this is another video as well, but that's why I established Hammond & Hammond Incorporated. And they wanted to know, this is a niche thing and she's going to charge so much. I don't take people's money, I just help you. You come to me with a problem and I help you. So the important question is, what assisted me to be granted the interdict to stay the writ of execution at agent court? This was simple. One, my evidence. Standard Bank's claim was a lie. They were claiming that I bought a car that I do not afford and that I don't have capacity to service the monthly installments. And for that reason, they want to repossess the car. My response to their lie was, first of all, producing the proof of payment where I paid cash for the car. Then I produced my bank statement from Switzerland that showed that money leaving my account coming to South Africa and the dealership rejecting that payment with the money going back to my account. I think they charged me, I don't remember, 200 francs or something for the transaction. But the money came, it was rejected in South Africa, then it went back to my account. Then, if you remember from the previous videos, I opened a separate escrow account. And from the day I stopped my payments to Standard Bank, I started paying into a separate account every month on the first of the month without fail. I didn't pay the correct installment. I paid the wrong installment that was nearly double that they were deducting. That is the amount of money I deposited on this account every month. So by the time I went to agent court, it was 17 months. I had 17 consecutive installments. That morning, I went to the bank first, printed a statement, and I got the bank to put a date stamp on it to show that I've just printed a statement, and it shows that on the first of every month consecutively, I've never missed an installment. Here's the balance, a positive balance of 17 installments to prove that the money is there. I'm withholding it because I'm forcing Standard Bank to perform, so I'm withholding my performance. It's got nothing to do with affordability. Secondly, I showed the judge my letter of demand saying to Standard Bank, giving them enough time. I gave them 3 months, by the way. I said, I'm giving you 3 months before I stop the payment to produce my installment sale agreement. In law, that is a very reasonable period. So I gave them the reasonable time to give me the installment sale agreement, and they refused. So I showed that. Then I showed the letter from the owner of the dealership that proved why I didn't take a copy of the installment sale agreement on the day I collected the car. Then I showed all the 12 emails to Standard Bank and their rejection. Then I showed email communication between myself and the dealer with the correct details of the year, the engine numbers. There was a lot of communication by email that they didn't know it's going to assist me in court, but I had printed everything. Then I showed the fraud case number from Sentin to show that I've reported the fraud. I then showed a report from the PI that showed that we are being tested by an independent handwriting expert. Then, importantly, was to show the judge that the order, the default or summary judgment order that was granted against me was done unethically, and it was a wrongful order. I was defending the motion, and I attended court. I was in court the entire day when Standard Bank unethically went behind my back to go and find an acting judge at Chambers to grant an order as though I was not defending it. That was the issue. So the judge then said, we have to give you time to rescind this judgment. Your evidence is sufficient to show that you are being wronged. So that's how I got the order. There's a last comment that is recurring on every platform, where especially younger people, even middle-aged people who are saying, I'm going back to school. I'm going to do a special video about that because I cannot tell you how important it is. Almost immediately after urgent court and the interdict, I receive an unknown call from a male voice which has a very urgent tone. He's insisting to meet with me because he has a surprise for me. And I say, sir, I don't know you and I don't like surprises. Also, I'm out of the country. I'm not in South Africa, so I cannot meet with you. Can you tell me what this is about? And he says, okay, they have purchased the latest model of my vehicle for me as a gift. But in presenting it, there are terms and conditions. So I tell him I don't like freebies and I don't accept gifts from people I don't know. I don't need a car. I don't need anything. So I thank him profusely and I say thank you very much for your kind gesture, but please don't worry about me. I'm good. About a day later, I'm on holiday now. About a day later, I receive a call from my butler in South Africa, and he says there were urgent papers served on him like a minute ago. And I asked him to read. Then I realized that Standard Bank is challenging the interdict. So I cancel everything, I fly back home, and I start preparing papers. The first problem with the papers is that they're only challenging my daughter. They're calling my daughter to court. My name doesn't appear anywhere, and the fight is against my daughter. So I do a joinder application to be enjoined as a party. I motivate why I'm supposed to be a party to this process. And then I respond to their papers. We file everything, we go to court, I think it's the 22nd of December 2016. This matter lasts for 3 days because Standard Bank thought it's just going to be a hit and run. They bring top lawyers and senior counsels. We've got no one. It's just my daughter and I. So we go, and my attitude that day is that I know Standard Bank has got deep pockets, but I have a brain, I have integrity, and I have all the evidence I need to prove my case. We get to court, they refuse to allow the judge to hear me. They put my daughter on the stand. They are grilling this child. They are tearing her into small pieces. At some point, I realized that, what is this? Like apartheid times. I'm being bullied for something, I've done nothing wrong, and I'm being bullied like this. I remember feeling the table. You know, they've got those wooden tables. I remember feeling the table to feel, does it make a sound that people can attend to me? And I started like madly, like banging my head on the table. I started banging my head on the table. And I remember it was Judge Fourie. I remember the judge said that there's something wrong happening there. What's happening? So my daughter is not like me. She's very calm. She calmly said, Judge, she wants to speak. It's her car, it's her money, it's her case. But Standard Bank is deliberately preventing her from defending herself. This has got nothing to do with me. I've never owned a car of this sort. I've never opened an account with Standard Bank. I've never opened an account anyway. So it is her account and she wants to talk. And Standard Bank objected. They objected. I went crazy. The judge said, are you under oath? I said, yes, I'm under oath. I did the joinder and I did the responses. It's signed by me. The judge says, I'll hear you. I stood up and I started telling the judge what this is about. Again, this is urgent court. The judge has not had a chance to look at what this is all about. I go to town. I tell the judge step by step where all of this started. I show the judge everything I utter. I have a paper to prove it. I show the judge everything. I explain how I've driven less than 1,000 kilometers on this car. Less than 400 kilometers it was. I show him the affidavit from the Rosebank police station. I show him that the car has been parked for 17 months. I haven't had pleasure to use this car. I show him the account with the 17 installments. I tell him step by step. I show him the report to show him how Standard Bank works. I show him how they got the order to take my car. I show him everything step by step. Standard Bank is going crazy trying to object from me talking. The judge said, sit down. I tell the judge everything step by step. The judge says, Standard Bank, these two people are laymen. You are here with senior counsels. Your papers are all over the place. These people have got paginated bundles of the same of the correct amount. Their papers are impeccable. The judge says, in my life, this is in a transcript. The judge says, in my life, I have never seen a more meticulous client. He says, I can't take this person's car. Everything she has done, I can't take it. I can't find fault in her. So what I need is that we adjourn. I need to go and read these papers. I need us to adjourn, come back tomorrow, and you come and tell me more about this story. So we go home. And from the holes that I had in court that day, I start putting together, do you hear when I say everything? I start unpacking everything. I put everything step by step to prove my case to the judge. We go back the following day. I talk the entire day. The Standard Bank's senior counsel is busy saying, do you have any more to say? Or can you stop talking now? I just ignore them. I go on and I tell the judge what this is about. The judge says, I'm sorry, I can't take this woman's car. Then my daughter asks to stand up and talk. My daughter says, first of all, here are the cases. This is not even an urgent matter. Here's the cases that prove that if a matter has got a record, like it was like 1,000 pages, a record this high, it cannot be in urgent court. So this matter does not even belong in this court. The judge says, do you have a case? And now I am shaking because I don't know what this child is talking about. She produces a case. When I was sleeping, she was doing her own research. She produces all the cases that support what she's saying. And the judge says, that's it. I need time to go and read. Long and short, 3 days later, the judge says, Standard Bank, I'm sorry, I can't take this woman's car. I give them my keys, I said, to prove that I'm not even using the car. Here are my keys to the car. But nobody is touching my car. The judge says I can't take her car. And actually this case does not belong in my court. You must go blah, blah, blah. Apply for joinder in the appropriate court and proceed with this case. But my ruling is she stays with her car. This 3-day court hearing was the crux of this case. It synthesized the matter for both parties, but importantly for the court. My biggest achievement on this day was not keeping the car, but it was forcefully draining the truth out of Standard Bank. I put so much fire in this man's belly that truth inadvertently snuck out of his mouth. In the heated exchanges, the Standard Bank senior counsel conceded. In court, this is in the transcript. He said, we can't deny it. There is indeed fraud here. And as he said that, you must remember Standard Bank does not send 4 people to court. They have very deep pockets. They send a squad. And remember, I was not a lawyer at this time. I had to conduct research to conduct this case. I was not a lawyer. I was just relying on my knowledge of finance and banking. So as he said that, the judge said, huh? And he said, yes, there's fraud, my lord. And as he said that, somebody pulled him and the squad is sailing up. You could see what is in trouble. And he tried to recover and he said, my lord, there is fraud, but the fraud is not from Standard Bank. The fraud is from the dealership. Yay! You know, I say this with humility, and I'm not going to mention all my qualifications, but let's just talk about the finance strand. Forget the diplomas and the certificates. BCom Finance, BCom Honors, Financial Management, Masters in Commerce, Financial Management, Masters in Business Administration, Strategic Finance, Executive MBA, Strategic Finance, PhD Finance. And with all that knowledge, you come and tell me a dealership can commit fraud through a bank? That was Alabama. I took the NATIS registration certificate of the car. I put it in front of him. And I said, bring your fraudulent installment sale agreement. Ngati, read the engine number. He read it. Ngati, read it here. It was different. Ngati, read the VIN number. Read it here. It was different. Read the year of the car. How can a car be born twice? Once 1 year and once 3 years later. Ngati, read this. Everything was changed. Ngati, the job of the biggest bank in the country, that is a financial provider to 20 million clients, they have a fiduciary duty to do things properly. The Vehicle Finance Department has a credit committee that is obliged to look at these things. You know, there's the National Credit Act where they have to look at a number of things to make sure that the person qualifies and there's no reckless lending. But there's also responsibility to the asset. Here's the difference I want to explain. You see, when you buy a house, You're going to pay it in 20 or 30 years. But the day that house is registered to your name, it is your house. A car is different. What happens is when they loan you the money to buy a car remains in the ownership of the bank. The bank owns your car until the day you pay the last cent, and then they change ownership. So you are financing an asset that you have not even looked at of this amount? So now that fraud was established, I moved to the bank's complicity on deliberately defrauding unsuspecting clients. This became the main issue. With 11 years banking experience, I confidently told the judge that the dealership can concoct all the fraud it wants, but the ultimate decision to grant finance lies with the bank, and only after diligent credit assessment. You see, the NATIS registration certificate is the ID of the car. There is no form that can be filled with contradictory information. They have to match. How do you grant a loan of this amount with a form that doesn't match the ID? Just that does not make sense. So, in effect, Standard Bank financed an asset that does not exist. The car that they financed does not exist. It doesn't even have an ID. So what I did was to write to the CEO again. You go to the head. And I said to him, now that fraud is established, you have to go and look at the approval form and see who signed that form. Then you need to conduct an investigation. Imagine our Honorable General Mngadi telling the country that there's rot in law enforcement. Imagine if the president would stand up and defend law enforcement. No. President Ramaphosa established a commission of inquiry. President. Did Mr. Sim Shabalala establish a committee to investigate this fraud? Now there's proof. There's a concession in front of a judge of the High Court. Did Mr. Sim Shabalala even look at this fraud? So this is my question. What is he protecting? Who is he protecting? I wrote an email and I asked him directly. I said, Mr. Shabalala, who are you protecting? Today, Mr. Sim Shabalala, I ask you in front of the entire country, who are you protecting? Who signed that approval form? Who financed a car worth millions that doesn't exist, that didn't have an ID? Please answer South Africans and tell us who signed that form. And then I need you to tell us why you failed to investigate. Where is your commission of inquiry? So, judge made his ruling. I remain with the car. Standard Bank requested visiting viewing rights at a mutually convenient time. And you know I'm reasonable, right? So I agreed. Considering their investment, I felt it was a reasonable request, pending the final outcome of the impasse. We also agreed that an independent person, like a sheriff, would keep the car keys that I offered. All this detail became part of the new court order from Judge Fourie. This development, however, infuriated Standard Bank, and this became the beginning of unprecedented violence. The tide also turned a different direction when forensic reports started flowing in. If you remember, I had reported the fraud case 685 of April 2017 at Sandton Police Station. And we got tested. They are very advanced. You close your eyes and they tell you what to write with your right hand and the left hand. It's just a very thorough exam. So I had submitted, both my daughter and I. And a warrant officer, Maribota, from the SAPS Forensic Laboratory in Pretoria. I had never met the person, but obviously they tested the thing, and she wrote a thorough report that confirmed that the installment sale agreement was a forgery. Then I had appointed a lady I got on the internet, Miss Terry Elmalay. This woman was very, very advanced. She would feed your handwriting and your signature into a system that then plays music, because she says writing, whilst you think you're looking, you're writing, you're actually writing with your brain. So there's no way you can forge somebody's signature, no matter how exact it looks. When you put it in this system, it tells you if they were written by the same person. Even if the signatures are different, when you put them in the system, it can confirm if the signatures were done by the same person. She wrote a scathing report, which also confirmed that the installment sale agreement was a forgery. Then my private investigator had taken us to two licensed forensic experts, and we were tested there differently as well. So when these reports came in, with my kindness, I shared with Standard Bank and I said, hey, here's the proof. And still, I called on Mr. Shabalala. I said, here's the proof that this is a forgery. You have a duty to investigate, because unless you are part of this syndicate that was exposed, there is no reason why you shouldn't investigate. What are you hiding? What are you protecting? I tell you, Standard Bank unleashed their wrath. We encountered so many violent incidents. I just couldn't cope. I don't want to traumatize you with the gory details. Unless Liwatlam goes, tell me,